So, there's been a pretty direct statement about Iran lately, and it's really put a spotlight on a high-stakes U.S. foreign policy strategy. It's basically a policy of negotiation that's backed by the threat of some serious military force. Today, we're going to break down that statement, the official strategy behind it, and then look at a critical assessment of its actual goals and outcomes.
And right at the heart of all this is a really blunt warning issued by President Donald Trump. This single phrase, well, it pretty much captures the intensity of the U.S. stance, and it sets the stage for a very clear, non-negotiable set of terms.
Okay, so what's the deal behind that warning? Well, it's tied to a very clear condition. U.S. military forces are going to stay put, positioned right around Iran. And this isn't just some temporary deployment, it's a presence that is directly linked to whether or not Iran complies with what the former administration calls a key agreement.
So what's the strategic thinking here? Officially, this whole approach is framed as a strategy of deterrence. The idea, right, is to use this very clear and very present threat of overwhelming force to ensure compliance, hopefully without ever having to actually engage in a conflict.
So what does compliance look like? It really boils down to two core conditions. First, a complete and permanent end to Iran's nuclear weapons program. And second, a guarantee that the Strait of Hormuz, a critical waterway, remains open for safe passage. These are the two pillars of the agreement that the U.S. is insisting on.
And it's important to understand, this is being presented not as just, tough talk, but as a carefully calculated message. The intended goal here is to remove any doubt and to signal that any violation would trigger a severe and immediate response.
Okay, so that's the official strategy. But of course, there's another perspective that starts to question how effective it's really been. This analysis looks at the policy not based on its stated intentions, but on its reported results. And it focuses on 4 specific strategic objectives that it claims were the real goals all along.
And that really gets us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Has this high-pressure strategy actually worked? Let's dive into how one particular analysis answers that. From this critical viewpoint, the argument is that the whole strategy is basically a bluff. The thinking here is that Iran hasn't caved to the pressure, and that there's very little political appetite back in the U.S. for another long, drawn-out military conflict. And that, in turn, gives Iran a much stronger position than you might expect. Now, according to this particular analysis, beyond those 2 public conditions, the U.S. strategy had 4, let's say, underlying goals. Let's walk through each one and see what the reported outcome was from this specific viewpoint. All right, so this analysis measures the strategy against those 4 objectives it claims were the real play. The first one, which this source calls decapitation, and what they mean here is the targeted killing of a key Iranian military leader, is marked down as a success. But then when you look at the next 3, crippling Iran's power in the region, sparking a popular uprising inside the country, and ultimately forcing a regime change, this analysis reports all of them as failures. So when you tally it all up, according to this specific analysis, the final score is just 1 success out of 4 goals. That's a 25% success rate, which, from this viewpoint, raises some pretty serious questions about the entire approach.
And that assessment leads to a pretty dramatic recommendation for a big shift in U.S. policy, a call for what's being termed strategic disengagement.
So, what's the alternative path being proposed? It's really straightforward. Pull U.S. troops out of the region and step back from getting directly involved in the conflict between Israel and Iran. The argument being made is that the U.S. can't just keep spending its resources to defend another country's interests.
And the core idea, the philosophy behind this advice, is really captured in this quote. It's this idea that a nation that overlooks its own foundation while pouring its strength into foreign affairs ends up risking everything, its power and its very purpose.
This chart really puts that choice into perspective. The argument here is that all of these immense resources tied up in foreign military commitments could be, and maybe should be, brought back home, reinvested in things like rebuilding infrastructure, boosting the economy, and investing in the American people. Now, this whole idea of disengagement isn't just about moving troops. It's built on a much bigger argument about where a nation's true power really comes from. The suggestion is that real, lasting strength isn't just about military might, it's something that's cultivated from within. So what are those internal strengths? Well, this viewpoint points to a few key cornerstones of national power. Things like investing in your people, building strong industries, sparking innovation, producing real value, and of course, protecting core values like freedom of expression and a multi-ethnic society. The argument is that these are the things that make a nation truly influential on the world stage. And this is a really key point. This proposed shift isn't being framed as a retreat or some kind of isolationism. It's being called a strategic realignment with purpose. It's about making a conscious choice to double down on those domestic foundations that, in this view, are the ultimate source of a country's strength and resilience.
Okay, so all of this brings the whole analysis down to a final, very practical point. If the strategy does shift from looking outward to looking inward, the next big question is, well, what do we do first?
And that leaves us with a really important question to think about. If a country like the US were to realign its strategy inward, taking all of those resources from foreign deployments and pointing them at domestic priorities, where should that investment go? Should it be infrastructure, technology, education? It's a fundamental question that gets to the very heart of how we define national strength and purpose.